Okay, I'm joined today by Blake Harrison, who is one half of the MMA Fans Podcast. Hello, Blake. How are you?
I'm good, mate. How are you doing?
Good. Very good. Thank you. Happy to talk to you. Should we just bring up the elephant in the room straight away and say that your co-host is one of the co-founders of Pod Bible?
Yeah. We can do that. Old Stu Whiffen, who, it's weird because the podcast, I suppose, came about in maybe an odd way. This is my first ever podcast. Maybe all podcasts come about this way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But basically, he obviously does Off the Beaten Track, and I was a guest on his podcast talking about music. It was a lovely chat, but we spoke for maybe about 45 minutes about music, and somehow we got onto martial arts towards the end of the conversation. And once we pressed stop on the recording, we then carried on talking about martial arts, and particularly mixed martial arts, MMA, UFC, Bellator, all those things. Mm-hmm. And I think we spoke for over an hour about that. So we spoke for way longer about MMA than we did about music, which is the reason that we were speaking to each other.
Yeah.
And we also both realized that we're just quite sad, lonely men, and we don't have many friends to talk MMA to, because it's MMA is still a very niche sport, particularly in the UK, and it's the fastest growing sport in the world at the moment. It's growing at a really rapid rate, but it is still quite niche. And so, Stu and I don't have probably many friends in general, but we definitely don't have many friends that we can talk MMA to, particularly at the level that we want to talk about it. When you're really, really passionate and into either a sport or a TV show or something, there's people out there that go, oh yeah, I've watched a bit of that or whatever, but you can't talk to them with the same kind of passion and knowledge that you do when you talk to someone that loves it as much as you do. And that's what me and Stu kind of found in each other, is we found someone that really knows the sport well, and that watches the cards every week and is really into it. And that's how the MMA Fan Podcast was born.
Fantastic. So have you been a big fan of all kinds of mixed martial arts for a long time, or are you fairly new to it as well?
Yeah, well, do you know what? It's a weird thing, because I suppose mixed martial arts as it is now, and particularly the UFC, I'm guessing I've been a very big fan of that for about, I'm guessing around about 7 or 8 years. And probably just before the whole McGregor thing kicked off, because obviously Conor McGregor is the most famous mixed martial artist out there, and his rise was this amazing thing to watch. And I think I got into it just as that was either beginning to happen or just before that was happening. And so I was able to see that all kind of unfold, which was really exciting. But I remember that particularly the UFC, because it is still the biggest brand of mixed martial arts out there, and the biggest organization within the sport. And I remember back when you'd catch random bits of it on Bravo. Do you remember that TV channel, Bravo?
Yeah, I do.
So every now and again they'd have a card on, and again, this is before the time of like series linking and recording and all that. You'd have to know when, you'd have to check the TV magazine and circle when this stuff was on. And that was when I was probably in my teens. I wasn't really interested in doing that really, so it would be something I would stumble across. And I remember fighters like Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz and Matt Hughes, and my brother, still to this day, who's 4 years younger than me but 2 stone heavier than me. Matt Hughes was a guy that would get guys and kind of pick them up and suplex them down. And he still to this day, if he can sneak up behind me, wrap his arms around me and shout Matt Hughes and then pick me up and put me to the floor, he will do it if he can get the chance to do it. So it's something that even from my teens, which was, gosh, you're talking, I hate to say it, like almost 20 years ago now, into my mid-teens and stuff, it was something I was aware of and something I enjoyed watching, but it wasn't something I was an uber fan of like I am now. That transition has more happened over the last 7 years or so.
Okay, that makes sense. So now that you're watching everything with much more of a keen eye and you're trying to pay attention to all the details, so that when you're doing your podcast, you know what you're talking about, are you able to counter these moves that your brother puts on you?
Oh, well, that is, again, the weight matters.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, I think that I'm definitely watching it with a keener eye now. But the one thing that me and Stu have pointed out from the very start of the podcast, and we continue to point out, is that we are not experts.
Yeah.
We are not fighters. We're not coaches. We're not BJJ black belts. We're not even MMA journalists. We are just uber fans. And I like to think that's a really lovely way in for audience members that, if you're a big fan of MMA, then you can listen to us, agree with us or disagree with us, and then get in touch with us we've set up a couple of social media things for it. Tell us why we're wrong. It's all part of the fun, and we'll hold our hands up and say, oh, that's a great point that so-and-so on Twitter has pointed out, because we were clearly wrong about that. But also if you're new to the sport, I think it's a great way to ease your way in, because, we know certain elements of what we're talking about. We've been passionate fans for a long time, but we're not going to go into it from a kind of in-depth journalistic level where you might get a bit lost, so I think we're quite a fun way to particularly get started in your MMA journey.
Perfect. Yeah, it sounds to me like you're sort of recreating those conversations that fans would be having together in pubs, if they were able to be in pubs, or at work, or whatever it may be. And also, a lot of the time with that kind of casual fan stuff, rather than the expert analysis, you sort of, you're asking the questions that the listeners will be asking. Like some might say the dumb questions, or the kind of things that the listeners want to hear about, but you might not necessarily hear people discuss on these expert panels. So what about the format?
Absolutely. To pick up on that point, I think that's one of the reasons that we've had some really great interviews, because we're very lucky. We've been able to get some of the biggest names in British MMA on the podcast already. Fighters within the UFC, fighters like Paddy Pimblett, who's just joined the UFC and is a huge kind of star in Liverpool and within a promotion called Cage Warriors. Up until now, he's joined the UFC. We've had Joanne Calderwood on the show, who I know most people listening to this won't know these names that I'm mentioning, but Joanne Calderwood is set, I think, in June or July to take on a woman called Lauren Murphy in a #1 contender fight for them to then fight the champion afterwards. And Joanne Calderwood is the first ever Scottish female mixed martial artist. So we've been having great, and we've also had Molly McCann on, who's the first ever English woman to win in the UFC. See, these for us are massive names, and it's dreams for us to be chatting to these people. So again, we're not like a journalist going, oh, who am I effectively in the office chatting to today. We're going, oh, this is amazing. We've actually got this person who I've watched fight loads of times and is very inspiring on the show. And also, because we're not journalists or fighters, we do ask maybe slightly more unique questions. Yeah. And, we'll try to get into, not just the obvious questions, which a lot of MMA journalists, because I listen to MMA podcasts a lot, and a lot of these MMA journalists, because they've probably spoken to these fighters numerous times as well, they will talk about, okay, that fight that's just gone, or your fight that's coming up, or something like that. And that's not the true essence of who that fighter is. And so when we're talking to these fighters, we're going, what got you into martial arts? Some of them have had very troubled upbringings, and martial arts has effectively saved them from a really terrible life. Other people were just, they were working on building sites and went, I really hate this, but I've always loved sport. Let me try and get into sport in some way. And it's led them down this path of mixed martial arts. And also the weight cuts in mixed martial arts are just so, they're horrendous, quite frankly. And it's probably one of the worst things about the sport. And we try to talk to athletes about that. And if you're not someone that's familiar with mixed martial arts, you won't be aware of this. But I referenced Paddy Pimblett again, who's someone we had on the show, that he spoke about having to cut 18 pounds overnight. So over a stone overnight, he cut in weight. And it's this whole thing, like, it's not like boxing. In boxing, you fight a bit closer to your natural weight. You cut a little bit of weight, but in mixed martial arts, because grappling and wrestling is a huge part of it, size really does matter. And so if you've got a size advantage over your opponent, it's going to really help you. So what a lot of these guys do is they will walk around in their daily life at, say, 14 stone. But then when they are fighting, they're fighting at a weight of 12 stone or 11 and a half stone because they've dieted down throughout their training camp to, relatively unhealthy levels. And then they take it even further by doing the water weight cuts, dehydrating their bodies to quite dangerous levels. And some people have suffered from it. We had I can't remember the lady's name, but there was a fighter in the UFC recently that got on the scales and passed out twice.
Yeah,
and her
I saw
fight
that
had to
clip.
be cancelled. You saw that
on your social media, as in the MMA Fan
exactly.
Podcast social media. Yeah.
Exactly. And she had to have the fight called off because, a lot of these people, they need to do, it's a science. The weight cutting is a science. And it's, I think, the worst thing about the sport, really, that these people are dehydrating themselves to these very, very dangerous levels. But if you don't know about mixed martial arts and what goes into that, I think that's a fascinating thing to learn about the sacrifices that these people put themselves through. But also on top of that, you have, preconceptions of mixed martial arts. And that's one of the other things we do with the show is we do talk to fighters, but we also talk to, quote unquote celebrities or whatever. We've had like Lee Mack, Ben Shepherd, Emily Head, who's my old mate from The In-Betweeners, and Thomas Turg, who's from This Is England, on the show, who don't know much about mixed martial arts. And then we get them to watch a classic fight. And then they talk about their preconceptions of MMA. Then having watched the fight, they talk about whether they still think that their preconceptions of MMA are correct, or if they can appreciate it on a whole new level. And again, if you don't know anything about mixed martial arts, that can be a really interesting way to get you into the sport and listen to things you won't understand or know about these athletes and what they put their bodies through and all those kinds of things.
I love that. That sounds like a great way of getting everybody involved, basically, as you say, because I think there are a lot of people out there who are intrigued by it, but don't necessarily know a good way in or don't know sort of what to expect. So yeah, it sounds like you've got lots of different things going on in your show. So obviously you've been recording this, you started off in lockdown, didn't it? And we're sort of coming out of it slowly, but I guess recording over Zoom just gives you access to anybody all around the world, right? There's probably all sorts of people you'd love to chat to. Oh,
definitely. So I mean, we've started off with the British fighters mainly, and I think if I can shamelessly say it, I think it's because a lot of fighters might be fans of the In-Betweeners, and they it opens the doors up for us because
of course
they might know a bit more about who the presenters are. But we're definitely going to try and reach out to fighters elsewhere as well. But the other thing is, as big fans of the sport, I think we wanted to talk to the British fighters first as well. They're people that we've actually seen fight live, some of them, and so yeah, that was really exciting for us. But definitely we want to be moving on to also including fighters from Australia, America, and also the ones that speak better English from places like Brazil and around Europe and stuff like that, because it's a global sport. And that's one of the other beautiful things about it, is that it's a sport where you get fighters from literally all over the world, and that's a wonderful thing as well. This kind of melting pot of different people.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Cool. All right. So final thing to ask, really, if somebody's listening to this now and they're thinking, okay, yeah, this sounds cool, I'm interested in this, I've watched a little bit and this is a good way for me to learn more about it. Is there a particular episode that you've put out so far that you think would be the one to go to and listen to? Or is it just start from the beginning? It's hard to that they can all be kind of viewed separately as well. It depends on kind of where you are on your mixed martial arts journey. But if you are just getting started, I'd recommend a couple of our interviews with fighters that have been great, like interviews with Molly McCann, where we're talking about the difficulties of being a female mixed martial artist and what that brings, and the extra hurdles that the female athletes have to jump over, which I think is really interesting as well. Paddy Pimblett, who talked a lot about mental health issues. Unfortunately, he's someone that has lost people close to him through suicide and mental health issues and stuff like that. And he spoke very openly about his own mental health issues. And I think that's another wonderful thing when you're hearing these people that are seen as like the toughest people in the world talk openly about mental health issues and be insecure in front of you. And I think there's a lot of strength in that. And I think that's a wonderful thing to hear. But also, if you're, for example,
going to watch a UFC card coming up, then we usually like to preview the big ones and talk about what's going on. We just did one recently with Scroobius Pip and Brian Lacey, who's an MMA commentator and a comedian. And we were just talking about the fights that had just gone last weekend and fights coming up at UFC 261, which is this Saturday. I'm not sure when this podcast is going out, but I believe it's like the 24th of April or something like that. So, but we'll be doing that constantly. We'll be reviewing some cards that have gone, talking about some cards that are coming up. And so there's loads of different ones to pick from.
Nice. Yeah, sounds like you've got a good range. Time sensitive stuff like reaction and previewing and stuff like that. But then you've also got interviews and things that will forever be interesting to go back and listen to. So that's great. Cool. Well, thank you very much, Blake. Congratulations on working with Stu Whiffen for this long and not going completely mad, I guess. We look forward to having you back on the podcast soon to talk about other podcasts you'd like to listen to.
Thanks very much, mate. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.